Hi, I'm Dr. Joseph Woodering, and today I'm going to talk about big problems in drug regulation when it comes to the communication of adverse drug reactions. And I'm going to talk about another problem, and that is a problem with medical education. I'm going to talk about how these two things dovetail together to where you get to a situation where you have all these patients out there who are developing severe side effects to psychiatric drugs, and they are being gaslit by medical professionals when they go in there. They are saying, I have this problem, I think it's protracted withdrawal, and their physicians are saying, no, you are hysterical, you have a conversion disorder, this is psychosomatic, this is a manifestation of your anxiety disorder, or they'll throw another label onto it, some other medical condition that they could kind of shove it into. So let's unpack this problem. I think it may be relevant to a lot of listeners on this channel who may have had a drug injury themselves, or they may be helping someone through a drug injury to understand, how did my doctor miss this? And why did it take me so long to get diagnosed? And so, yes, that's what we're going to be covering today. Before I go any further, I want to say thank you for watching these videos. If you enjoy the content that I'm putting out here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the content. And let's get into it. So, for a long time with these benzodiazepine injuries, maybe you could say they weren't being recognized by the medical professionals because they weren't in the drug labels. And because of that, presumably, that's the information that goes out in the packages for the drugs, what the physician should be aware of. If it's not in there, that makes sense that physicians shouldn't know. And okay, yes, it's been published about online for, 20 years, but maybe there's no requirement that physicians go online and they read those specific publications on that little niche of benzodiazepine safety. And okay, maybe that's, they don't read about it that way. But as of 2020, late 2020, I believe, protracted withdrawal injury, it entered the drug labels. It was put in there in a warnings and precautions. And for those of you that don't know, warnings and precautions, it's like the most important area in a drug label for safety. The number one safety problem is a contraindication. You say this patients who have this condition should not get this drug no matter what. It's the most severe warning, but then after that, there's the warnings and precautions section, which contains the information that everyone should know if they're prescribing this drug. Protracted withdrawal from benzodiazepines is now described in the warnings and precautions. It is in there with a full description of the symptoms. It says it can last more than years. And it covers everything: cognitive problems, muscle aches, muscle twitches, all of these things which people have been complaining about for years. It is recognized by the FDA. I'm pretty sure it's recognized by the EMA and Health Canada and other kind of global health regulatory agencies. But still, to this day, I treat patients every day, and they're still struggling to find doctors who can diagnose this condition, and they go in there and they get told that, you have an anxiety condition or something like that, or they just disregard it and say, this person's just complaining a lot because they're drug seeking and they want to stay on this medication. I need to give them the tough love and just keep on going with this taper, even though, they're kind of developing a neurological injury, which is described in the drug label as something that can last for years. So, so it's totally in the label now. So why? Why don't doctors know about this? And I'm going to say it comes down to two things. One thing I noticed in my medical residency, which I think is just a disaster, is that psychiatric trainees aren't taught how to read drug labels. In fact, most doctors are not taught how to read drug labels. If you look further back on my channel, there's some videos, some of the original ones I did were talking about how to navigate to the Daily Meds NIH website where you can look up all the drug labels. This was not anything I was ever taught how to do as a student or as a training physician. It was something that I needed to learn how to do when I started to write drug labels when I was working at the FDA, and then also when I went to different pharmaceutical companies and did that work there. But this is not just something that is my experience. I talked to my wife who trained in Mount Sinai, and she also went to University of Colorado, and she was not taught how to read drug labels or even find them during her education. And then I talked to other colleagues. I have a family medicine physician as well. also not taught how to read drug labels. And why is that so important? Because it's important because that's where the most up-to-date information is. And so let's say you're a family physician like my friend, and you're not just a psychiatrist, so you're not seeing patients mainly on psychiatric drugs. You have patients, they're on dermatological drugs, they are on autoimmune drugs, they are on oncology drugs, they are on cardiac drugs. All of these drugs can cause things that look like genuine medical conditions. And if you can't look at these labels and figure out, what are the most common or most important adverse reactions to this drug, and a lot of them are new. A lot of these drugs that kind of filter down, they're ones that people didn't see in training either. So you need to be able to keep up with these drug labels, when patients come in, so you don't misdiagnose them and just say, oh, you have another medical condition, bang, here you go, let's start you on a new drug. And it just leads to that kind of that train wreck case of polypharmacy where you end up accumulating 20 different pills and you end up in massive problems. So I don't know why it wasn't taught. There's a few things in medical education which are now, I think, maybe it's at the state level, but it could even be federal regulation. They are mandated that you learn. For instance, every time I want to renew my medical license, I need to go and do 2 hours of opiate safety prescribing. Because of the opiate epidemic, that is in there. Different states, they mandate different things for board certification, but being able to read drug labels and find them is not something. So how do doctors learn about drug safety? Well, they learn about it through their training, through their interaction with their more senior colleagues and talking to them. They'll say, I think it's this. A more senior physician will come in, examine the patient, and say, oh, you got the wrong diagnosis. This person's actually having this problem, this side effect, and, this is how you know. And that's kind of how the education is taught about these things. And so what that means is you're essentially just learning off the person more senior to you, and where did they get their knowledge from? Chances are it was passed down to them, and so they're operating on old knowledge, but also they're probably operating on what's in the medical literature. And what we know about the medical literature is that it skews towards the benefits of drugs rather than the side effects. And this, I don't want to sound like I'm wearing a tin hat here. I think anyone that understands economics and commerce will get that pharmaceutical companies who have a vested interest in their stock price and selling their products, they are going to pump out publications and journals which talk about the benefits of the drug. And unless they are explicitly forced to by regulators, and this does not happen, they will not publish, say, hey, let's do a 10-part series on the most important side effects of our drug. Let's invest the time and resources to get this into the Lancet or the New England Journal of Medicine. Let's make sure everyone gets this information out there. That is not how it works. So, and it wouldn't work that way for any company that wants to, keep their stock price high, which is their fiduciary duty, I think. I guess for the person running, obviously they want to keep patients safe, but they play by the rules they follow the rules, but it's also skewed towards the benefits of the drug. So you have all this medical literature out there, which is, more talking about the benefits, not really describing the safety. And so, you get physicians that don't really know about the safety of the drug, educating other physicians, and, they're not reading drug labels and kind of looking at them in that way. Okay, so, all right, so we have a problem with medical education. But the second part is, and this is a problem in the FDA and also in the European Union as well, and I imagine for other drug regulators, is there is a risk mitigation problem. For instance, let's say you're a drug regulator and you learn about, protracted withdrawal. We'll stay on this topic, but it might as well be PSSD as well, the post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. You learn about this problem, you go, okay, we're going to put it in the label. But as we know, doctors aren't reading labels because they're not being taught how to do it. What's the means of getting this information out there? And there's actually several means. As a regulator, you can go to a company and say, I want a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy for how you are going to get this important information into the hands of physicians so they can best, help patients make informed decisions about the drug, and treat any side effects. They can say things like, we want you to send out letters to every physician that's a part of the American, Family Medicine Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Association of OBGYN. You're going to get their mailing lists from the medical boards, and you are going to blast them with a letter. It's going to come in the mail, or it's going to come by email, and it's going to have a one-pager that describes this risk and the new updates. So you could do that. That's one way of getting things out there. Another way you could get things out there is by saying, you, drug company, you need to go to conferences, and you need to put together a schedule of symposia, and you need to talk about this. You need to have a stall at these annual conferences to just kind of get this information out there. So there's all of these little things which are pretty practical, and they make sense. How do you want to disperse this information out to your customers, physicians who are going to be prescribing this drug? But they don't do it, and so that only seems to get done for a select number of risks. So you have a lot of really serious risks, protracted withdrawal. Benzos are being used like crazy. PSSD, I think it's like, well, this is different. So PSSD is not actually labeled in the US yet. It's in Canada and the EMA, but I just talked to David Healy, who said there was no Dear Doctor letter. But if SSRI use is anything like it is in the EU is anything like it is in the US, then this is serious, because I think it's like, Jesus, it could be 1 in 10 people in the US are on SSRIs. And if you're not telling them that they can have permanent sexual dysfunction, like in Europe where that's labeled, that's a disaster from my perspective, that you're not getting that information out there. Imagine putting a 16-year-old boy on this or something like that, and then permanent sexual dysfunction when they come off the drug. You essentially ruin someone's life. So I don't know how they made that decision, that they didn't want to put that in a Dear Healthcare letter and send it out there and say, hey, you need to know about this, because that 16-year-old boy is going to want to know if there's a risk of having this. So there's there's just holes there. And so that's essentially my overview of the topic about how so many doctors out there don't really know what these risks are. When I think about it, that's the two biggest things. One, problems with getting information out there from drug regulators, and doctors just not learning this stuff. I think it's a disaster. It's an absolute travesty to the patients out there who are getting gaslit every day by physicians. They're coming in there, they're saying, my life has been messed up by this, and they're just getting shrugs, or even worse, they're getting told that they have some kind of mental disorder. So that's my overall download on this topic. Let me know what you think. Was this helpful to kind of get my perspective on why I think this is done, diagnosis of adverse reactions is done so poorly these days? And if you have an adverse reaction and you need help and you want to work with someone that's wise to it, please consider coming and visiting our private practice. We do inpatient visits in Utah and in a select number of other states. Look in the description below. It has a link to my website. And thank you all for your attention to this video, and have a great day.